Now, this is where we're going to go deeper into labor and what is happening on the JOLTS or job openings and the participation rate. So this is when you start looking at just how wide this has gotten. And we've talked about this in terms of retirements, people still not in the workforce, which is why the participation rate still remains lackluster, even though job openings continue to grow. But we've also tried to show on how some of these job openings are really just one position that they don't want to pay people as much, but they still need a certain more man hours to do it. So one position becomes two, and you're seeing that prop up different areas, but it's starting to level off. And as people take those jobs, you have people coming back in that are off of long-term unemployment. That will accelerate pulling down those job openings and normalizing it a bit. But when you look at just the labor market distribution on the spider chart, you get an idea of just how unbalanced things remain in terms of hiring plans remain elevated in October. Job availability, again, private quit rates at a record. Private job opening rates at a record. Payroll employment still there, but then the job finding rate is dipping down. You look at the initial claims, it's coming down. Average hourly earnings still strong, but again, same as April. But then when you start looking at working part-time for economic reasons, still there. Marginally attached workers elevated. All of these things continue to say that there's still this bifurcation in the market, which is, again, going to drive up wages. And if wages go up, costs go up for the company. If the costs go up for the company, they try to capture that in raising prices. So then when you look at the job quit rate, this is the other issue where people are just quitting their jobs and looking for a better one. And if you get a better job, it's usually at a higher rate. But all of these quits also leave job openings. So then, but you have to figure out, do you still need this job? Is this going to be something you're going to hire for? What is the wage you're willing to pay for? Is there some way you can split this, this responsibility amongst two different people? So it takes time to get that job, if someone leaves, to get posted back out to see if it's actually needed in that company. So then when you look at what Jeffries has come down to, or why did employees quit? The U.S. is in the midst of a great resignation, everyone likes a good name for things. So the takeaways is, number one, compensation is the number one reason employees are quitting. Burnout is prevalent across industries as people are like, look, I've busted my hump over the last couple of months, especially the last 18 months. I need a break, and they're going sideways. Flexibility is the new normal. Again, and I know I have friends that have received surveys of, do you want to be full-time, flexible, or full-time at home? I should say full-time in the office, flexible schedule, full-time at home. And people with the flexible schedule, you have to designate which 2 days you will be home. And you're seeing that more and more. And people are quitting their jobs to obtain that. And then 80% support a 4-day work week, which isn't surprising given how things have shifted over that time period. So then reasons cited for unemployed workers for not going back to the office. Care responsibilities is still one of the highest. COVID fears has come down but elevated since we've had a little bit more activity. Spouse employed, spouses going back, which means that, again, spouse employed and care responsibilities are closely linked, because if one spouse goes back, maybe you can't afford it, childcare, or childcare has become so expensive, it doesn't make sense to go back yourself if your spouse has gone back. Financial cushion is coming down as those savings dwindle away. And then unemployment benefits, again, is one that is dwindling down as well. Then when we start looking at U.S. initial jobless claims, you can see that they're still elevated, but obviously much higher, coming back down. Recoveries in jobless claims and payrolls generally occurred around same time in the past two recessions. At this point, claims may be closer to hitting prior low before payrolls recover their peak. And that's where it's interesting on non-farm payrolls versus jobless claims. And it's just a matter of getting people through. But this disconnect is also being shown in that spider chart in terms of where things are falling, how people are handling the situation. And then when you look at the downside surprise for October on housing starts, where we only had we had housing starts at negative 0.7% versus a positive 1.5% expected, and a negative 2.7% in the prior month. You're seeing new privately owned housing units starting coming down, while private housing authorized building permits going up. This points to, again, as we've been talking, more issues on supply chain, labor, availability of raw materials, where people just can't break ground because they don't have the capacity to do so. Building permits stronger at 4%, positive 4% versus 2.8% estimate. And again, it was a nice bounce from last month. Then when we look at there is no more surplus of cheap and eager workers as they've dwindled down, now this is when you start to see these wages start to go up a little bit faster because you need to pay extra to get these people back through the door. So U.S. unemployment cost index continues to grind higher. People not in the labor force who want jobs as a percentage of the population is back to the 20-year median. And then the temporary unemployment rate is back to the 20-year median. So now the next level of getting people through is, again, raising wages. So then when we start looking at, well, what does that mean? Where you have raising wages, which means costs go up. You have your food prices going up. But now let's look at the U.S. Schiller home prices versus CPI shelter. And you get an idea of just where the home prices are and where shelter is coming through, which is why we've been talking about a big spike in just this underlying CPI driver, which is why the rate of inflation will slow. But we're going to give way to stagflation as we progress through 2022. And then depending on when we see this slowdown, deflation could be a Q4 2022 event or a Q1 23 event, depending on how the consumer reacts and when they stop buying, when you'll start to see some of that rollover. And then the Redfin Home Buyer Demand Index still remains strong, up 28%, which is why we continue to see housing not stay on the market all that long. And this is the nice move up for the November home builder sentiment, again, because Redfin's going better. Still see a lot of movement. Home builder sentiment to 83 versus the 80 estimate. Index at a 6-month high. Future single family sales unchanged at 84, which is the highest since December. And prospective buyer traffic up to a 5-month high of 68. So again, you're seeing some of this steadiness, but you have Zillow putting stuff on the market. You have some of these big entities that are now over purchased, now dumping. What does that do? And are people trying to lock in maybe this last hurrah as this Fed starts to taper their buying of mortgage-backed securities or MBS, which could push rates higher? So then when we start looking at the purchase, on the purchase side, the year-over-year home price appreciation, continuing relatively low mortgage rates, along with supply constraints and work from home flexibilities are fueling historically high HPA, home price appreciations. Even though interest rates are at their highest level in 19 weeks, projections for mid-December remains at a robust 14 to 16%. Without more inventory or mortgage rates of 4% or more, they expect, the AEA Housing Center expects HPA to remain at double digits through the rest of 2021 and into early 2022. No cash out refinance. Again, you're starting to see that slow down a bit. And then the cash out refi is starting to go up again as people try to lock in these cheaper rates. So then when we look at the shelf life, this is another reason why the shelf life or the median time U.S. homes spend on the market before a contract was signed still remains the most bullish it's been in years, as the supply remains the constraint. Even though you're starting to see buyers balk, you're starting to see the issue of who is the next incremental buyer. They're still out there and they're still trying to capture what is left of these lower rates. So I know this is a shorter segment. Now in the next segment, we're going to go into Europe and talk more about what is happening with Europe and what does that mean as we head into the end of the year.